So welcome everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us. We're delighted here today. We have Gary Wheeler with us. Gary is a fellow of the American Society of Interior Design. He's truly one of the giants in the field. I've been in this field for a long time, and ever since I started, that name has been out there, Gary Wheeler. So I kept running into that name through the years. His career spans over 40 years, and he's been a leader in many capacities along the way. In 1978, he co-founded the Wheeler Group, a very successful design firm. So much so that Perkins and Will decided to acquire the company in 1996, and Gary then became national director of interiors, and also later a managing partner of the firm, headquartered in Chicago. Later, Gary joined Gensler in their London office, and he was director of the Workplace Europe group starting in 2004. After Gensler, Gary went to HDR, where he was Interior Design and Workplace Strategy Global Leader. And then more recently, he joined ASID as the CEO of ASID, an organization that we all know very well. Gary is an inductee of the Interior Design Hall of Fame. And folks, that's big leagues right there. He has gotten the Senior Fellow Award from the Design Future Council. He's one of the few designers out there who has the fellow distinction from both ASID and IIDA. Most telling to me personally is that Gary, over the years, he's been present, he's been visible, and he's been engaged. And to me, those are hallmarks of a real, true, and committed professional. So, needless to say, I am personally delighted that Gary's with us. I will hand it over to Julie, who's a friend of Gary, and Julie is the chair of our advocacy board, and she's been a fan. She's an alum of the program here, and a contributor over the years, always looking for ways to advocate for the program. And she's been with the advocacy board for many years. And she said, I believe I can get Gary to speak to us, and here we are. So thank you, Julie. I'll let you start the conversation.
Great. We're just very excited to have Gary here. He has been a very dear friend for over 30 years. We knew each other in preschool, just so y'all to make that clear. But we right away just saw the same passion for interiors, as well as we both like a good laugh. So we just became really dear friends. And I would say he has probably been the most inspirational leader that I have had in my career. He has a stunning ability to shift the culture when he explains from his heart what he sees as the future in interior design. In one of the professional associations, he just has that way about explaining it in a way that everyone by the end of a message gets on board, and gets it, not only just gets on board, but willing to work and excited. And so I got to learn a lot of my own personal leadership skills from Gary, just by watching how he would take me sometimes from, oh, I'm not sure, to all of a sudden like, okay, I'm in and I'll volunteer, and what do you need me to do? So I just thank him for that. And I hope you guys get to just experience a small part of this amazing man who's not only one of the brightest people in any room, but he's also someone who cares deeply about the people and how we work and live, and is just very passionate about what we all do every day. And as you can tell, he's had an amazing career. I never know what country he's in. There was a whole time period he would be in Russia for a while, then back to Dubai. Just he's always been on the road of just making fabulous interiors wherever he has found himself. Whichever country needed him, he would get on a plane and be there. Gary, I would love you to start maybe telling us how you got started in your career. What were some of the early influences that you had in your beginning part of your design career?
Certainly. Well, first, Roberto and Julie, I want to thank you. And I hope you can't see it, but my face is bright red. That introduction was embarrassing. It's an interesting career because I came from South Louisiana, from New Orleans, went to school in a small university, Louisiana Tech. At that time, it was considered one of the best schools for interior design, and it was part of the School of Architecture. One of the rare at that time that was incorporated architecture, art history, and interior design, because most of the schools were in home ec then. And so it attracted a lot more males than other programs. But the influencers it's really interesting. From my mentor professor at the University of Louisiana Tech, Miss Moffett, all the way through my entire career till today in this position, somehow, for some reason, ASID has played a role. And my professor talked me into attending the first student conference. A lot of you are student members of ASID. Get involved. It led to my first job in Houston, Texas. And from there to moving to Minnesota to design the new law school for the University of Minnesota at 24. You don't get chances like that very often. And I would not have had that without ASID. And that introduced me to my business partner, Nyla Leiserowitz, who ended up being the head of Gensler for all of the upper Midwest. And so every touch point of my career has had something to do with this organization and the people within it, like Julie. As Julie said, we've been friends for over 30 years and served on boards together, on committees together. And it's that connecting and networking. And I'm sure we'll talk more about networking as we go, because it's kind of core to how you advance your profession and your professional activities. And a warning right up front, if you really are passionate about this, about interior design, you do not get to retire. So you better love what you're doing, not only because they won't let you, but because you don't want to. I retired the 1st of May. 2 weeks later, I became CEO of ASID, unplanned. So just be aware that this doesn't go away. It's a wonderful profession that people do because they love it, not because they have to do it to make a living. It's because we can't do anything else.
Thank you. That's speaking of which, how have you seen your networks change and grow? And how did you go from sort of absorbing to also learning the techniques of leading from the people around you?
Oh, that's a good one. At several levels. Number one, watching. I watch people that I admire, and you learn a lot of lessons from the people that aren't so good at it, by the way, and don't do what they do. I'm not a good salesperson, but I can tell a story. And so I was taught to tell stories to my clients. And making clients or becoming your clients' trusted advisors is probably the best goal I can give you with your career, because they will stay with you. I know Julie has clients that have been with her for years and years. Just last Sunday, I talked to my former clients in Russia, in Moscow, in London. We had a video call. They call me for advice on everything. has nothing to do with interior design. It has to do with all kinds of things, because they trust my opinion and they know if I don't know, I probably know through my networking somebody that can help them. So introducing your clients to others is very, very important. And client retention is difficult, but it's done through passion. So if you look at what's happening right now, well, I'm sure we're going to talk about the economy in a minute, but the firms that are doing well, that are getting through this, are people that are led by people who have good client relations, because those clients need them. And even though corporate work is really down, all the big firms were all really hurting, they're very busy because their long-term clients are there saying, we need your help to reimagine and make our spaces better coming out of this pandemic, which will be a part of, I'm sure, a big part of this conversation today.
It will be. You are so right. I had a client recently call, and I have done 17 projects with them, and they have just called and want to downsize, and which the scale of their current project to what they consider downsize is to a lot of people a very large project. And they called, and I just thought, sometimes when I think there's no more second or fourth home, or they will give me a call. So, and it's just, there's no advertising whatsoever, but like they know I'm going to do it, to their passion, which is exactly what you're talking about. As you have gone through and seen sort of big firm mentality to small firm, when you started your own firm with Nyla, and you were clearly very much in the lead there, what was the transition like for you as you got into a very large firm? And what skills did you clearly, I think a lot of the skills would go into a large firm because there's the ability to tell a story. But what sort of learning curve did you have to do to get into the environment of a Gensler or Perkins and Will?
It's steep. Number one, there's pluses and minuses to being in small firms and big firms. So let me touch on that first. The pluses for being in a small firm is you learn to do everything. I mean, everything. I was the chief financial officer. I hate numbers. I have to have an adding machine to count to 6. I just don't do it. But my mind makes me do it because I know it has to be done. So you learn accounting, which, by the way, when I went to university, I asked if I should take an accounting course. And my professor, guidance counselor, asked me if I could balance my checkbook. And I said, yes, every month, down to the penny. And they said, that's all you need. You don't need to understand anything else. And today I handle millions and millions of dollars of my clients' money. Go take an accounting class, everybody, just so you understand what they're talking about. It's a basis. Just do it as an extra credit thing. Big mistake on my part. So I had to learn all that. The other thing about a small firm is you learn to draw, you learn to write, you learn to tell stories because you're selling and you're doing. And you have no one to help you. You don't have a marketing team. That's you and your partner. So Nyla and I started out, it was just the two of us working out of my second bedroom. And we built a firm of 50 people. That was, as you said, acquired by Perkins and Will. When I joined P&W, they made me 3 promises. I could go back to designing. I didn't have to manage an office, and I didn't have to move from Minneapolis. 6 months later, I moved to Chicago. And 2 months after that, they made me managing partner, which meant that I could no longer design because I didn't have the time. So big firms lie, but it was the best thing that ever happened to my career. By the way, if you get a chance to work at P&W, fantastic firm. I can't say enough great things about them. Great design and great people. But what I learned there is that I had all these things at my disposal: HR, marketing, all of these wonderful minds. But my staff got pigeonholed. So if they were good at telling stories, they got to tell stories. If they were good at drawing, that's all they got to do. And that meant, especially young architects, got a lot of roof details and a lot of bathrooms. Now, you have to know that to be a practitioner, but they would finally get so restless and bored because they weren't being challenged and growing that they would leave. So we had to find a way of keeping people and giving them opportunities. So small firms, you learn to do everything. And big firms, you can get pigeonholed. Now, if you're aggressive, you can break that mold. But if you're not, you're going to sit at your desk 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day doing what they tell you. Great learning, not unhappy for having done it. I've owned my own firm twice in my career, and we're 3 big firms in the middle. And there's pluses and minuses to both. By the way, it's much easier to go from a small firm to a large firm because suddenly you have all these resources. But going from a large firm to a small one, very difficult because suddenly there's no one there to help you and you never learned how to do it. So if you have any aspirations of owning your own firm, you need to do both. Work for somebody in a smaller firm and learn, go to a big firm so you really learn how to market and sell yourself and do big, beautiful projects, and then start your own firm. So
Very true.
my 2 cents.
Tell me about some of your thoughts in general on leadership, what you've learned about leading others. Just when the word leadership comes to mind in your career, what do you see that are constants and what are things you've had to kind of learn and then relearn? Or
I think for a designer, the hardest thing to do is learn to actively listen. We want to talk, we want to tell, we want to show. And I think my biggest lesson in leadership was learning to listen. It's still difficult. It's still difficult. I want to pick up the pen. I want to reach across the table and take it out of your hand and sketch while we're talking. And that's okay to a point, but that means I'm not letting you tell your story. So I think learning to listen is one. I think one of the keys though to me getting where I am is I had fabulous mentorship my whole career. From my military days, I was Air Force pilot for a short time, my first job in Houston, everywhere I went, for some reason, I ended up having good partners and good mentors, and still do to this day. And I look to them. And by the way, now it's people considerably younger than me that are mentoring me, sharing knowledge and advice and getting knowledge back. I love the student programs because I get to talk to people like you. I'm anxious to see some of your questions later because it's really important that we share and learn from each other. So I think the leadership thing it's an odd word because I don't think of myself that way. You know, Julie just said that in my intro, but I don't see myself that way. I see myself stumbling over my own feet sometimes, but I think it's about listening and it's about caring. And so the lessons I've learned and how I learned them, one of the things about getting involved in an organization like ASID is if you really participate, number one, you're going to be your friends for life, as Julie and I are demonstrating. And you're also going to meet resources that you're going to be able to use forever in your careers. Even if you leave the design industry, those people are still going to be useful to you. So use ASID to build that network and that relationship, and it will then lead you on and on and on. And I got my true training in presentation skills and leadership and strategic planning, which was one of the best courses I ever took, was when we were officers at ASID. Our board all went through strategic planning training. And I have done strategic planning for major firms because they didn't have a strategic plan. And I said, you need one before we can design a building for you. You have to know where you're going and why. And that, think about that, interior designer and interior architect telling a Fortune 500 company, they need to get their act together, and that is where we bring value because we see the big picture. And I think interior designers, because we're about the individual, I think that's where I get my inspiration the most, is because we, designing a beautiful box is great. Working with Ralph Johnson at Perkins & Will, he should be a black cape, but he's very introverted, so all he wants to do is design, but his work is superb. It's some of the top in the world. But working with people like that who do beautiful buildings, but don't deal with the individual in that building and how the building is really going to be used, that's your job. That's our job, to think about why they're doing what they're doing and what it might be next. It's, as we're seeing right now, nothing we built 10 years ago is going to be the same, as we're not going to use space the same. And so us, can bring that thinking to the table with our clients of, okay, you just took a 20-year lease, or well, in America, it's a 10-year lease. In London, it's a 20. They're much more optimistic than we are. But thinking about that, if I'm really doing a space for a client and I really want to help them, I did 5 million square feet for JP Morgan Chase in London. If they have to downsize now, they have drawings in the drawer already from when we designed that space to give them a start to do that. Because we, as part of our challenge to them, is things are going to change. We didn't know this was a change, but things are going to change. Let's check this to see how you can consolidate and expand quickly and easily. So, well, it's not right because it's old now, but at least they have the beginnings and they understand their space can be used differently. So I think that's what you bring to the table as designers, is this thinking. And look at residential. We have all this open space now where the kitchen and the living room and the dining room are all one room. Well, and then you have 4 kids all going to school and you're trying to work. That doesn't work anymore. So spaces being able to adapt and be flexible for future, I think is going to be one of the big outcomes of all this. So I think it's listening to people. I've joined the Salk Institute's science group because they're doing brain research and linking it to architecture and interior design. Was I ever challenged to do that when I was in school? No, but it's a fantastic organization. And I'm going to do a little plug here.
Okay.
If anybody is interested in thinking about the future in a different way, and most of you on this call will not know who I'm talking about, but Dr. Jonas Salk of the Salk Institute discovered the polio vaccine. And he did it in a radical way. He did not follow the given science of the day, much like we're doing with the vaccine to try to control the pandemic. A lot of people and scientists are saying, I'm not taking that vaccine because it hasn't been properly vetted. Okay, I'm taking it on Saturday. If it only protects me for 6 months, great. But Jonas is one of my heroes. And if you ever go to California, you must go to the Salk Institute. But he wrote a book. This was about 15, 20 years ago, called A New Reality. His son, Jonathan Salk, you can see his name down here at the bottom, has updated it. Now, this is about population growth and how we're in that huge growth mode around the world, and India and China and America and the West are going down with birth rates. And it talks all about that, how it's going to level off. That it's the same science can be put to the pandemic. You look at his charts and everything, you say, oh my goodness, this is exactly what we're going through. So it's simple read, very graphic, not a lot of words, so you don't have to stay up all night, and a lot of charts, but it's called A New Reality. And it's kind of finding something that made me feel like I can get through this and we'll live through it. We're gonna be okay.
How many downturns in the economy have you survived?
Every time I go into business for myself, it's a great recession. So Niall and I went into business in 78 in a recession. And I went to business for myself in London in 2008 when there was.
Oh, wow.
So beginning and end.
Let us know when you go into business again.
So you can all run. Yeah. But you know what? I always was able to take a couple of clients with me to, have a Coca-Cola and a hamburger on the table, but never had big clients go with me. But because of reputation, both times it grew very quickly. So I think part of this is relationships. Never burn bridges. You never know where you're going to go back. And if you are with a firm and you hate it, give proper notice. They may walk you out the door. That's okay. But give proper notice. Never say anything negative. When HR talks to you about why you leave, be honest, especially if it deals with any type of improper activities or being treated poorly. They need to know that. And that's another one of my passions I've been talking about is the world has changed. Do not take bad behavior from anyone. You are now in an era where you can speak up. In the past, you couldn't do that, especially women. And now you don't have to ever be allowed to be put in that way again. So please use your resources if anything ever like that happens. I could go on that for next hour, so I'll stop now.
That's great. That's been wonderful. You and I have talked and we're sort of trained in the idea of servant leadership. So let's talk about that a little bit, about sort of the, to be first, you have to be willing to be last.
Yes.
And
you know what? To this day, I'm still that way. When you're working on a project and you have a role and you've finished your work for the day and you turn around and somebody else on your team is drowning, you don't go home. You at least offer to help. And so many of us don't do that any day. Design is not a 9-to-5 job. It's so deep up here, it's a 24-hour job. So even if you go home, have dinner with your partner and your kids, you'll probably go back to work for a couple of hours because that's the right thing to do. And yes, we're overworked and we don't get paid for it, but that's where the passion comes in because you want to do it right. But to this day, I still fix coffee for clients when they're talking to one of my team. I'll go get the coffee or I'll empty the trash can, whatever it takes to get the work done and make everyone feel valued. That's your job. And if you do that, the people above you will respect you and you're the ones that are going to get promoted. It's not only talent, because I know a lot of people with fabulous talent that can't go up because they're so self-centered. It's that sharing, being a team member. By the way, our work is all about collaboration. Architecture can be very isolated, having run a major architectural firm, but it can also be very cross-functional. And the best are like PNW, which is very cross-functional. Everyone's invited to the table. And that's the interior designer's role, is say, let's get the landscape architect in here on this conversation too. They're going to be as necessary going forward as we are, by the way, because inside, outside is going to blur between interior design and interior landscape architecture, much more than it has in the past. It had already started before the pandemic, and now it's imperative. So I think one of the key issues here is, how do you become a collaborator? Yes, it may be your idea, but by the way, once it's taped up on the wall, it's no longer yours, it's ours. And the biggest disappointment you're going to run into is when someone takes your ideas and never gives you credit. That will happen. I will
That will
promise you. More than you ever want. It's okay. You have the original in your pocket. Don't throw anything away that's of value.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, is be a team player. Get in there in the trenches, make the project better. By making the project better, you will be recognized. If you're not, move on.
Sorry, my phone.
It's Julie's, it's not mine, thank goodness. No, you turned off your microphone. Uh-oh.
Sorry, I have no idea how my phone got rolled to being the one that rings. So it's and I don't know with these phone systems how to fix that. So there will have to be an expert that comes in here and punches 3 buttons and it'll all be over. Let's just talk also about designers as agents of change. What do you see? I mean, the world is changing so fast right now. I think we'd all say it's stunning.
Yes.
You know, what a wedding is like is change. I mean, they're just not a part of our life right now. But a trip to the doctor is changing everything.
And
So-
it's not, there'll be a new normal. We'll
Right.
never go back to what we were before. We will come probably close to something like that, but not next year, and maybe not the following year. Like, give you an example, ASID just put a hold, I did it today on a conference call, on all in-face meetings until a minimum of August 31st. So we've just canceled our conference. And I'm doing that because it's the right thing to do for individuals, especially people with families. It's just so important, and we all have families somewhere. And so I think here's my thinking on this, because I think it's important, and it's a challenge to all of you. We are in the perfect position to lead, because if we don't, somebody else will. And it goes back to my statement about being about the individual. You make people, by the spaces you design, no matter what it is, residential, hospitality, healthcare, corporate, you make them feel comfortable, safe, productive, and well. And well and safe are going to be 2 key things going forward. A lot of people will not want to go back to the office until they know that it is safe to, and that means not just because you told me that you had it cleaned, but mental health is going to be a huge thing coming out of this. Interior designers deal with that. And we've had kind of the perfect storm. Think about this past year and a half. First, we had the Me Too issue coming out of California. I mean, we've talked about that problem for 100 years. And normally it would have gone away in 3 months. But towards the end of that 3 months, we had the Floyd murder here in Minneapolis. And no one would ever have expected that to happen here. We're a liberal city, very open, very integrated, and it's horrible. That went global. And it wouldn't have if it happened in Detroit or someplace else like that, where we kind of expect that, Baltimore or Chicago, really, South Chicago. And then third, the pandemic. So you have 3 major events all happening on top of each other. So we have that perfect tornado. And coming out of this, the door for interior designers, to me, the door has been not only opened for us for opportunity, it's been blown off the hinges. And so we either take the opportunity to lead the change coming out of this, or we're not going to be of any value going forward. And again, it crosses every area of the design industry, how we interact with people, how we help them, how we advise them. So you need to learn, you need to expose yourself, You need to make sure that you know what's going on and why, so that you can help your clients. Don't just put plastic stickers with arrows on the carpet in an office. That doesn't solve the problem. That may get you a pathway, but by the way, in 2 months, nobody will follow that rule, or in a week, no one will follow that pathway anyway. What is it we're going to do? Because people do need to go back to the office, no matter what you do, to collaborate. So, and your own offices will be one of those. People must interact. And while this is good to get it to a lot of people, I'd much rather I had been in Florida with you in a room. And so that is true interaction and caring. And so the new normal is going to be different. This isn't going to go away. I think we've learned that we don't have to be in the office 5 days a week. And certainly our clients have too. So working from home is going to be a big deal going forward, and being productive. But we'll go into the office for knowledge sharing, interaction, caring, all those things that we need to do to make our projects go forward, to make our clients better informed and design better spaces for them. And we can only do that through collaboration. You're back on, Julie, you're on silent again.
Right. Who do you think would be someone that you're tracking what they're doing research wise, and just sort of with all this change in mind? You know, we know that all the large commercial furniture companies are all having to just scramble right now. What does it look like? What is, you know, I particularly have noticed in our spaces that, you know, we have a standard commercial air conditioning system, and I have thought through, you know, the whole idea of a clean air supply, so that you don't have that stagnant air just circulating. Interestingly enough, like they have in an airplane, they purify, but we don't in our offices, or never really even thought about it in the same way.
We don't even wipe off our desk because it's covered in paper.
That's true.
My
I
desk
thought
covered it.
paper
That's
was
why I moved.
purifying. Between the scales and the samples and the paper, it's covered.
Well, I have a couple that I'd
Yeah,
share
tell me
with
who
you.
you like to pay attention to.
One is Whitney Austin Gray. She's head of research at IWBI, the International Well Institute in New York. Whitney is brilliant young lady, very, very smart. And in fact, I'm working with her on a new partnership with ASID to share research together. And they're really doing some great research on wellness, and everything around it, and also diversity and inclusion. I don't know if everybody knows, but the new well standard for buildings takes into issues dealing with diversity. Now, I would not have thought that would have been one of the things, but they found that it was very, very important for wellness to have a diverse culture. And so inclusion, equity, and diversity are now written into the well standard that's just been released. Another one, a practitioner, is Kay Sargent with HOK San Francisco. I mean, LA.
And okay.
Yeah, anyway, HOK. She is brilliant. She's an ASID member also, but again, known Kay for 100 years. But she never follows the company line. You read all these things, and all the big firms are putting out these news flashes on what you're supposed to do, and water the plants and all that kind of stuff. She'll go totally different. I like her because she challenges the status quo. I don't always agree with her, but she really upsets the apple cart. So Kay Sargent and Whitney Austin Gray are two people that I've really been following closely lately.
That's great. That really is helpful, because all of us need to learn right now. I mean, I don't think there's one person in our profession that doesn't need to wake up and learn new things right now. If you think you can just sit at home and watch more Netflix, which trust me, we all have, Um, but at the same time, I think it's important to think through what even our own spaces need to look like, and our communities, who is
Yes.
around us, how we can, and clearly diversity, I know, is a big subject going on now with ASID, and I paid attention to that because we can't, unfortunately, interior designers for a long time have sat in a bubble of the clientele is necessarily sometimes, sort of the boardroom at the top, unfortunately, in many cases, has not been as diverse as it needs to be. And we've understood that as designers, but it's anyway, it's just a conversation that I'm very thrilled to see is changing on every level. It's not just change, what I mean? But I think we all need to pay attention as we hire, and I think we need to pay attention that, it also is going to become greater wealth is going into a broader community.
Yes.
And I think it's, so I think all things that are also good can also just be good for business too.
Yes.
So what have you been, your own thought processes on this? I know y'all have been talking and thinking a lot. Are there ways, I know y'all are looking for leaders sort of that kind of come forth if anybody is interested?
Yep. There's two major initiatives within ASID right now. One is with CIDQ, the people that manage the exam, the NCIDQ exam. Tom Banks, the CEO, has brought together 5 major organizations. So for once, we're all working together. IDC, Interior Designers of Canada, IIDA, ASID, CIDQ, and IDEC, the Educators Council. All 5 organizations are working together to analyze what's already being done by the different organizations, see how we can support each other instead of reinventing the wheel, not checking boxes. This isn't one of those like it's always been in the past. Okay, we did that. We had a conversation about diversity. No. This is about what are we going to do about it? One of them is getting into grade schools and high schools and exposing students to what an interior designer is. And so those programs, several of them are already in place, but we're going to do a national and international endeavor on that one. That one we've already agreed on. The other one is within ASID, and Jennifer Kalstad, the immediately past chair. By the way, a little plug on Jen, to show you where the interior design industry has gone in this recent year. Jen was head of interior design for HKS Architects in Dallas. She's Canadian, by the way. And she has been hired by Jim Hackett, the former CEO of Steelcase, who is now the CEO of Ford Motor Company, to take over all design for Ford. So she has 1 million employees. That's 750,000, something like that, employees that she's now responsible for providing workspace. Anything but a car, she's doing. Showrooms, offices, a museum, redoing downtown Detroit. She's an interior designer, folks. You can go wherever you want to go. And think about that. A Fortune 500 company, one of the largest firms in the world, the person leading design is an interior designer. We've come a long way. That would never have been thought of 10 years ago. So you're coming to the profession at the right time, which is another plug I'm going to do. I hadn't planned on these plugs, but they're working out because it's perfect timing. Internships for you are going to be difficult because internships are about being in the room, sitting next to somebody that's giving you their knowledge and exposing you to things. Well, we can't do that right now. ASID started last year a virtual internship program. Check into it. It is brilliant. And the reason I say this is if there's a subject matter that you're interested in, like research or healthcare or something, you can go into an internship with someone who leads that part of the profession. They may live on the other side of the world from you, but you're going to have this internship with them. So Roz Kama, who's one of the top healthcare designers in the world, had 20-something interns this year in one of her classes. They were all brilliant. They got great stuff out of it. Our head of research at ASID, Susan Chung, Dr. Chung did one, and she taught people how to do research. What are the rules? How do you do it? How do you vet it to make sure it's real research and not just intuition? So you can learn so much from these. Julie, did you do one? Did you do one?
Yes, I did. No, I've done several, and they were wonderful. Really great students, and they've kept in touch, which I find fabulous.
Yep.
Because they've figured out that, I told them that, I might know people in whatever town they want to end up in, and that's also something funny to talk about is our networking. I mean, our dear friend Penny Bonda used to do a CEU, and she called How to Use and Abuse ASID, which always cracked up at the name. And she would get a big group there. And it was so funny because she said the connectivity can last you a lifetime. And I ended up with a project. A client called me and said, we have a project in Paris. Would you like to do it? And I was like, yeah. And so then I realized, I called Tom Banks at the time, who was our, I can't remember whatever his title for.
Deputy director.
Deputy director. He was in the #2 chair for an amazing guy who's now heading NCIDQ. So I called Tom and I said, Tom, look in our database. Do we have any members in Paris? And he said, yeah, we do. And he said there were 3. And I took 4 years of French and I can't even say these names. It was like Jacques Dubois, and these names. And then the last one was, and Penny Smith. And I said, give me Penny Smith's phone number right away. And her husband was an attorney and that had been assigned to Paris, and she became my legs on the ground and had sources. So anyway, I just laugh. You never know where this connectivity and the people I had mentored by Zoom now have kept in touch because they have, they're leveraging that sort of relationship that I know their number and I've been willing to help them. So I just think it's something, it also is just a good thing. I got my very first job, just like you, Gary. I went to a regional ASID meeting. I met the head of an architectural firm. They had 21 interior designers, and it was my very first job. So I just thought that was, it's interesting how you're there for a lot of reasons. There's student competition, whatever, but all of us go for maybe even just going with some friends and getting in a car and going somewhere when you can. But it's just a nice way to tell you that you never know where you'll meet people and how you can leverage that. What do you think, as you have been thinking about the new, the world coming, do you think we're going to have spaces that are will there always be a home space for everyone, do you think? Will you be in and out of an office, or do you think you'll return to a full-time office?
I think it depends on the industry. Say investment banking is really struggling where all this trade people can't be at the big desk yelling at each other and talking and rooting each other on. There will have to be some trading desk back, that type of thing. But for, say, a law firm, half the time the partners are locked in their offices anyway with the door shut. So why do they need to be in the office? So I think offices in some ways will go away. There's a big push saying, oh, we're going back in offices. I do think the pendulum will swing that way for a while. But long term, that expense is a waste expense. But I think we either have to come up with better ways of cleaning, meaning that if I'm in an unassigned space, when I leave, I have to put my stuff away, and the cleaning people have to come in and disinfect. that's going to be for the next 2 years at least. I do think we will come back because people want to connect. Now, I was just talking to Benjamin Moore this week, who are a big sponsor with ASID, great company. And I asked them, are you all back at the office? And they said, yes. Our headquarters, which has about 400 people, they're all back most of the time. There are a lot of people working from home, at least part-time, and that's okay. They let everybody do whatever they felt comfortable with. But because of the type of business, they're back, but they have taken great precautions of separating stuff. They've had no major breakouts. They had some trouble right in the beginning. They immediately, because they learned from their China production and then South Korea, how to close it down. So they closed down Benjamin Moore before the federal government advised them to. So they were prepped and they have gotten through this pretty well. So I think learning lessons, that's another great reason to be in an international firm, because you learn from other people. One of the great things about Gensler was living in London and doing work in Paris, in Milan, in Rome, in Moscow. I was traveling to all these places and learning that we don't know everything. And in fact, they were way ahead of us in corporate architecture.
They're way ahead in Europe.
Way ahead, especially Scandinavia. Oh my God. In education, K through 12, and long-term living facilities for people with Alzheimer's and stuff. They just make us look like we're paupers.
Well, building systems, I mean, removable building systems and all that is just so, it's always fascinating to go and just touch and feel, and it looks like a wall, but it, it could come down in about an hour. And that just
Yep.
fascinating to me.
And you brought up mechanical systems a minute ago. I forgot, I wanted to touch on that. America has built all of its buildings to be sealed. You can't open, a door is hard to open. High-rises in London still have operable windows. And they're going to come through this much better than we are. So one of the big things is make friends with your engineers, because all interior spaces are going to need to be re-engineered, because you do need new air handling systems. And while the architects will claim that, it's the interior designer and the engineers that have to retrofit and not destroy the space at the same time. So again, an opportunity here is your architectural interiors team needs to really be knowledgeable about what's happening with mechanical systems. Now, you don't need to know, that's the engineer's job. You don't need to know the details, but you do need to know why and how and the reason. And the IP can help you with that, by the way, their training. And there's new systems coming out that will clean the virus out of the air in enclosed rooms. And we're putting those, and they're portable because we're trying to do it fast, but we're putting those in classrooms, prison cells. Think about it. A place where you can't get away from something like this are people in jail. They are night and day locked in a little cube. And what are we going to do to help these people? And hospital rooms, classrooms, anywhere where you are in small, tight spaces, we have to find ways of fixing really fast. So make friends with engineering. Do you have an engineering school there?
Yes, there's definitely engineering,
I want to do a crossover course, Roberto, with engineering and design. Share both ways.
Sounds like a good idea, especially mechanical engineers.
Yeah. I think also I have found, and I think Gary, you'll agree, that it's also just knowing the question when you're sitting at that multidisciplinary table and it's early and you say that air quality is something you want to put on the table early, and that cleanliness, I think knowing enough to be dangerous is a good thing at projects, because it then puts everybody, the other experts, on alert that you want them to stretch themselves and think differently. I know we were working on a healthcare project for just a small surgical center, And they literally had this kind of, it looked like R2D2, that they could roll into each room after it was done. And it took it 20, 30 minutes. And it was just all this, the virus, all bacteria and virus were killed by light, and it would just scan around the rooms. And they were saying they were too expensive for every hospital room so far. But, I thought nowadays, just think what 10,000 a room if it got safety to employees for a long time. I mean, so I just think the world is about to, some of that stuff that's been there, it's going to get smaller and easier and cheaper. And I think some of the technologies there, we just haven't asked for it. And so therefore it's not been utilized as it needs to. So, but
yeah, a lot
that's,
of the research and systems are there. We just haven't. I think that's this whole wellness issue too. Like US Green Building Council, when we started sustainability, it was a nice to have. Isn't that a nice idea? And the clients say it's going to cost more. And we say, well, yes. Well, no, I'm not going to spend the money. Well, now sustainability is built into most projects.
right.
Wellness is the same, and maybe even more so. And I know that IWBI went from doing a couple of 100,000 square feet a week to doing 5 million a day. So it is blowing up because, again, of people needing to feel well and retrofitting current spaces. So they're doing some great things. It's not just them, but they're the ones that have the most science, I have found, behind their thinking.
Okay, and we'll soon go to questions. I just have one question for you, Gary, one last. When you're sitting down and you're interviewing someone, what's the most telling things that what's the conversation look like for your best interviews? We don't have to go into all the bad ones, but what is memorable to you that made you really want someone on your team?
Well, because that's, it's so individual in a lot of ways, and yet there are some commonalities. Number one, be prepared. We know you're nervous. Don't worry about that. Be 10 minutes early and walk around the block. Never, ever be late. That tells them about you right away. Now, things happen. Subways break down, whatever. The flight's late, notify them. Don't just show up. Think about dress. You don't have to have a coat and tie or dress on, but do your research on the firm that you're interviewing with. And you want to dress at least equal as far as, if the managing partner normally wears a tie and you're a guy, wear a tie. Or at least a dress shirt and a sport coat at minimum. Always dress, and I do this with clients, by the way, too. I do my research. I'm always dressed as well as they are or better. And I always call them Mr. or Mrs. until they tell me otherwise. So show respect. That's being on time. Dress appropriately. You don't have to be uncomfortably dressed, but just dress appropriately. And have your portfolio only show your very best work. You don't have to show everything you've done, but pick the projects that you're most proud of, that maybe you did research first. So talk about the research, the impact it had on your project, and its outcomes. Always remember, problem, solution, outcome. So when you're telling your story, your pretty pictures, your renderings, your color boards, or whatever it is you're showing, your videos, are not about how beautiful they are, and they should be, but it's the story. We will get that's you've done a beautiful job. And it isn't always the one with the prettiest portfolio, by the way. It's the ones that can explain why they did something and the expected outcomes. That is core. We want to know you think and are willing to be at the table and share. And so We're even doing blind interviews now more and more, and it's part of the diversity issue. Take away the school name and the photograph of the individual so that people aren't judging you because you're Black or Asian, or that you went to a school that I don't like. So we all have prejudices. And so more and more big firms, in fact, we just did it at ASID for our marketing person, we didn't look at where he came from. We looked at what he had done. So more and more you're going to see, that's going to be one of our recommendations, I think, coming out of our student analysis is don't judge it just on the school. Okay, we have enough people out of Harvard now. Let's look at someplace else. And so be prepared to be yourself. Don't try to be somebody else. Be honest, be at the table, be on time, dress appropriately, but not cartoonish, you know, be
Right.
who you are.
You're not interviewing to be a lawyer. You know, I mean, you're not, it's not a lawyer's job. You have to.
Yeah.
And I think too, you and I have been through a lot of training where you learned about ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but even when I already knew what I didn't, what I wasn't good at. Like I never was totally shocked when they would tell me you're not good at this and this. I was like, oh yeah, my mother would have told you the same thing. But I think it's always good to know your strengths. And so if you've never done, guys, some of those tests and ways you can know your own, how you think and because every firm needs all sorts of parts to make the best team. So I think if you say research is my heart, I look up and I can spend, a whole day on it and it's flown by because I love it. I think that's it. And then if you love nothing better than, whatever space planning, like, I think it's wonderful to be able to say what caught your passion and
Yes.
what you just, and say, I want to learn all parts of being an interior designer. I don't want to be pigeonholed in just research, but I just will let you know if you have those kinds of projects, I can offer that because it is something I love doing. And don't be embarrassed about, if you oversell and say, oh, and in my spare time, I can do your books. And then you don't pay their sales tax for 10 years, that you just want to, target what you know that you know.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to say what you're bad at, but you just say, these are the things I think that I could bring to your firm if I had this wonderful opportunity.
That's a very good point.
And the second meeting is when you ask all the questions about, what am I going to get paid? And do I have any vacation? Or, the very first meeting, I don't think it's great to start all your list of what you require. I think it's sort of a sharing of what I work here, what I work well here. Could I bring something to you? And then when they call you back with an offer, that's when you get to have all those wonderful sort of technical meetings about the firms.
And it doesn't hurt to have done your homework before, so you're sitting down with them and you know some of their projects. And if there was one that you particularly liked, said, I know we're here to talk about my work, but could you tell me about, and suddenly they know that you have done your homework. And that's always important too. That's a good one. But I agree, on the first interview, unless they bring it up, don't talk about salary, don't talk about holiday, all that. That's down the road. Any firm all firms have to have basics. They're going to have healthcare. They're going to have vacation time. They're going to probably pay you a decent salary, especially now, because we're going to lose a whole generation again of practitioners. Try to stay in the practice because it's going to be of your benefit. Every time we have a downturn like this one's caused by disease, but every time we have one of these, we lose a group of people and suddenly we have a big missing blank. Right now, it's the 35 to 45 age group. There aren't enough of them in the practice. So next, it'll be your group, the group that are now in their early 20s.
There's going to be gaps in
practitioners there. So you're in a perfect group age to move up and get opportunity. Take advantage of it.
That's great. Okay, let's go to questions. Do you want to chat questions? How are we going to do this, Roberto? Gary, you can ask me questions. I'll ask you questions.
Julie, I believe we have the capacity to to have someone unmute themselves and ask a question live, and so we can try that.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
have a dialogue. I've seen several things flash up that might lead to good questions too. I can't stop to read them, but if somebody looked in the chat room, there might be something there too. But if you have a question, yeah, take yourself off closed mic and just ask me. I don't bite, by the way, I promise. Well, sometimes. But.
So while students are thinking about their questions, here's one. It looks like the future is bright, although the immediate future is maybe tricky for seniors graduating and going into the workforce. And during those times of adversity, making that alternate choice is quite important and sometimes quite telling. So, what are some strategies for a plan B? That yeah,
that's an interesting one. That's thank you, Roberto, for giving me a hard one. A couple of things. Number one, try to stay, even if it's a fringe, try to stay in something that deals with design. By the way, working in a dealership or something like that, that's where Nyla was. She was at a dealership here in town because that was the only jobs after the 2000 and whatever 4 recession or whatever. 74, I think. Anyway, there weren't a lot of jobs. And so she went into a dealership, but that taught her business. So that helped us when we started our company. And she knew furniture specifications down to, every detail. So look for a related organization. I can tell you all the hospitality, healthcare, I'll get there. Residential sources are all going to be looking for people. Residential is going gangbusters. Healthcare is going gangbusters. So if you have an interest in either one of those, they're going to be hiring in related fields and in interior design. If you're in corporate, it's going to be tougher, but that's where things like the dealerships could come in. And the 2008, we lost everybody to the gaming and high-tech industry because anyone that was really good at 3D modeling and stuff is now working for Apple and everybody else. And I don't think they're going to be the group this time, but it may be Tesla, you don't know. But there's a lot of avenues that need design thinking. So do your research on design thinking so you can think of other avenues to use it, and do a couple of the virtual internships just to see what you're interested in. Because you may find that, like when I was a student, the last thing you wanted to do was be told you're a healthcare designer. That was just horrible. And now people in healthcare design, like Amy Mays in New York, and Roz Kama, they are so passionate about what they're doing and the impact they are having on humanity that it's invaluable. So I would look for, don't say you already know what you want, look around. I thought I was going to be a painter. Luckily, I had a counselor that said, Gary, you really don't strike me as the type of guy that's going to want to live poor all your life. So maybe you want to get a job. So I got out of painting. So thank goodness. But I still use those skills. So what is it that you love or could be passionate about? So expose yourself to it. and use those virtual internships, because they're really a way of getting exposed to really great thinkers all over the country.
And I do think sometimes, like you're right, it's good to look at things like high-end tile places like Ann Sachs or something. Like, designers are walking in and out of those kinds of places all day long. And so
you're gonna
you
get to know.
also, you
Yep.
you mentor, you're learning about different ways of production and products. And so anyway, I just think there's a way to think a little outside the box to meet other designers. It's the contact for your next job. And I've seen it happen,
Yeah,
a
like
great
Holly
way.
Hunt.
Yeah.
If you could get in Holly Hunt, her clients are both contract and residential.
Right.
And I know she's known as a residential, but in London, I used her all the time for corporate work. And so you get in there and look at different sources that will, that's a very good point, Julie, because every designer, either virtually or in person, is going to come in that showroom and needs your support. And so you learn what the needs are, therefore you're going to be invaluable when you move on.
Right. Another question?
Come on, don't be shy.
I guess going off of what you were saying, Mr. Wheeler, like how long you don't want to, I enjoy every field. So it's like, I don't want to be jumping around during my career too much, right? And it's like, how do you, from your experience and how do you know how long to stay in a field for? Do you get bored, or is it just because opportunities happen and,
It's a
serendipity?
bit of both. Almost every job I've had has been a minimum of 10 years. Not by plan. Nyla and I were together as partners for 10 years. She went on to go to law school in Chicago, decided she didn't like lawyers and went back into design and went to Gensler. But I had that company 19 years before we were bought by Perkins and Will. And then I was at Perkins and Will over 10 years. I was at Gensler London just 5 years, but my own company there 10 years. And each one of those was because of opportunity. So P&W was because they approached us and said, we want to expand our interiors practice. We've heard about you. We want to buy your company. Art Gensler had been after me for years, and I always said no. I always say I knew too much. But when somebody like Art taps you on the shoulder and says, you're going to meet me in London for the 4th of July. No one to know that you're over here interviewing. I'm going to take you on a tour of projects. And if you don't think it's the best work you've ever seen, I will not bother you again. So I said, I'm getting a free vacation to London. Why not? So I went to London, walked around, and 2.5, 3 days later, on the way to the airport, accepted the job. So that was opportunity. And the third one was going back into business was also opportunity. One of the designers that worked for me, the two of us said, we can't deal with the bureaucracy anymore, and we left. So it's whenever I get comfortable, it's not bored. Whenever I get comfortable, I know I'm in trouble because that means I'm no longer thinking, but that's just my personality. So I either have to tip the apple cart up or I have to move on. But I agree with you about moving on too much. Stay in your first job, even if you hate it. A minimum of 18 months should be at least 2 years before you move on, even if you hate it, unless you're being abused. And don't put up with that, as I said earlier. But I think staying and learning and growing within a company is very, very important, but that also makes you invaluable to the people that can tap you on the shoulder. And that's where reputation comes in. If you're known as a team player and somebody that cares about what you're doing and you're a good designer, you will be tapped. You don't have to take it. But one of my former employees just last week announced his departure from HDR. I canceled him to stay. Even though in my back of my mind, I wanted him to move on, it was time, but I talked him through the benefits of where he was and the fact that HDR is a very profitable company, and for all the right reasons he should stay. But on his own, he left to go to a smaller firm so that he could be in charge of his destiny. So it depends. And it's your own personality. Do you want to be in control, or do you want somebody else to be in control? That's one of the reasons Julie went out on her own, is because she's always being told what to do. And she finally said, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. Isn't that true?
Yes, I had a great job with tons of architects in this firm, huge firm, 600 people. And they would tell me, like, I would come up with a suggestion, and I work with architects every day. We're referred by architects. I have great relationships with them. But the group that I worked with was used to telling the interior designer what was going to happen in the space. And even if it did not make sense. And you just had to, you were told, I was told not to bring things up in a meeting. Like, I know you think this is wrong, but don't you ever mention it. And I took it and learned there, and learned about scale of projects, and learned about a proper set of drawings and all the things. But in the end, when I left, I really decided I wanted to be able to be hired by the client, so that I had a seat at the table, that there were 2 votes on something. The architectural team had a vote, and then we had a vote. But I always also, guys, when you're in that kind of position, I never cut an architect off at the knees. I call them ahead. I say, hey, there's something really bothering me. I will do anything in the world to be a unified team back to the client. But I did want him to know that I could call he or her, the architects need to know you do have a relationship with the client, which a lot of times in the bigger firms sometimes doesn't happen. And so you just have to eat. And like you say, different firms they each have personality. You can do some research on that. You can contact, I was telling them Glassdoor is a good resource for sort of like seeing what people say is the culture. And you'll find your place. Also, don't you think, Gary, consulting is also an option in
yes.
hard times?
Yes, and very much so right now. Working either on your own or in a consulting firm, it's a great way to learn process and thinking, and how to use research, because there's tons of research out there, but it's just data. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you read, I'm talking out of school here since I'm talking to educators. If you read a lot of the research at IDEC, which is a lot of it's about tenure and stuff, it's not transferable to what we do, because no one has taken it from research to practice. And so what we're trying to do is bridge that gap between the two. So there should always be outcomes. And as a consultant, you could be someone, if you're really interested in that takes this research and turns it into reality for use. What are the outcomes, and what should its impact be on your thinking or your projects? And that's what we're going to be doing for IWBI's research team, because they have this fabulous big research, that how do they make it real? We're going to be the ones that make it real for them. So, yeah.
So take any skill you have. If you're great at 3D, all those things are outsourced many times.
3D, yes. Whoa, if you're really good at it and you can do video and all that, we're all looking for it.
Yeah. So, all right. Any other questions out there?
Come on, there's got to be one more person that's not shy.
Kind of along the lines of the discussion we were just having, a lot of us are starting to look for jobs. So what are some qualities of firms that we should look for when we're looking into these jobs that we're getting?
That's a good one. Note that most people that do put information on things like Glassdoor are unhappy. So read it so you're prepared, but don't take it to heart. Reputation You look at the interior design 100 or 200 listings. Reputations can be better, by the way, than reality, and quite often are. But ask other designers that you know, ask people like Julie or me, depends on which city you're going to or where you want to start. But check around. It's hard to ask clients because you don't know who they are and you don't know who to ask there. But if you, depending on where you want to practice, I'd really do your homework on the internet now because everyone has projects. An example, I'm going to use somebody that I admire very much. If I were looking for a job in corporate design today and went on the internet, I would look at LSM in Washington, D.C., Lehman Smith McLeish. And Deborah Lehman Smith, to me, is the top designer for corporate architecture and interiors in the world. Her work is just stunning. She was featured in last month's Interior Design magazine, the issue on New York, and she's the lead-off project on at Hudson Yards. And it's amazing because this is before the pandemic, but she convinced her client to give up rentable square feet and pull the glass wall in and do outside work and gathering areas for their offices. Convince them that where they were, the views, the natural air, all of that was so important for wellness. And now they came aboard during the pandemic, and what could be better? So forward thinking, listening, and knowing what's coming next. I mean, I can't imagine what the cost of that space is by square foot, and to give it up, not having 10 desks there with guys, everybody sitting like this, what that costs that client. But she did it. And that's where you as a leader can do it. So look for firms, depending on where your interest is, like Deborah Lloyd Forrest, who is Perkins Eastman for hospitality. She does beautiful work in hospitality. Roz Kama for healthcare. Not that you're going to work for them, but look up what it is they're doing. And then when you're searching in your area, see people that do similar work. So find people you want to follow them on LinkedIn, and then see where they're going with their business heads and find somebody that thinks like that. So right now you have much more opportunity to do that. Back in my and Julie's day, unless I went to an ASID meeting and we didn't have, then it was IBD, that came later. There wasn't any place to go to meet people like that. So use your ASID chapter since you're getting ready to graduate. As soon as they start having chapter meetings, I don't know anything about the chapter there. It used to be very strong. Go to a couple of meetings and meet people. And I know you're going to be shy. We all are. You're not going to see yourself there because you're going to be the only young person. And so drag one of your classmates along with you or a friend and go to the meeting so you don't feel like you're an island, and find a way of introducing yourself. And that will then lead probably to a job. Or if not, a connection to a job.
Right.
Thank you.
And go to the student conference if you can. Scale this year is in September, and Washington, D.C., so not far from you. You can take the train straight north. And September, I think it's the second week of September. It's 10th, 11th, 12th, something like that, because it's also the same time that Salone and Milan is supposed to happen. So it's that first week of September. And that'll be some of the first things that maybe go public, where we can actually be in a room together. So Scale is a great opportunity. It's usually 400 to 600 students there, but there's also going to be some of the top designers in the world there to share their stories with you and mentor you. It's also a portfolio review competition. So you can send in your portfolio and get great feedback from practitioners on your portfolio. So if you don't have a job by September, think about going to Scale.
And you do have 10 or 12 professionals that are involved in our advocacy, including Susan Chung from ASID, is the research guru that she is on our advocacy board. And we're from, a lot of us from different areas. And so if you want to kind of say, who do you know in Atlanta? We all have contacts. And then if I don't know exactly what you're after in Atlanta, but I know someone who does another specialty there, and I can get you to talk to them, then they'll tell you the 3 top healthcare people in that area. So it's that 6 degree of separation game. You sometimes have to kind of work through how to get to somebody in Dallas, and you'd be surprised how we all can probably put our finger on somebody.
By the way, Kyle has been fabulous at capturing all this. So if you look down in the chat box, he's captured names, places, dates. So when you watch this, when it's released, it's all in there. He's done a great job.
Tell Kyle thank you. All right.
So yeah, it's really use. That's what networking is for, and it's really interesting what's going on right now. It's going to be defeating for a while. You're going to feel like, oh wow, what did I do? You know, what's going on? But it's also, remember, if there can be a good thing out of this, it's that opportunity is going to be there. And the interior design industry is poised for leading that opportunity.
That's great. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Given us all a lot to think about, as usual. So we really thank you for your time, and it's really been a wonderful, wonderful session. So thank you so much.
It's been a long time since I've been there to speak to that school. It was about 30 years ago, I think. Probably not that long, but I've kind of followed you along for a good while. So, and Susan Chung just flipped up there. So be aware that that we're here for you. That's what ASID is about, is connecting and being connected. So if we can help, please let us know.
That's great. Thank you very much, everybody. Roberto, do you want to? I had a few books on leadership that I had thought I loved. And so I put them up, and I put the first one is Max Dupree, who was did a whole book on leadership as an art. And he was I think he was one of the very first owners of Herman Miller. And he has written 2 books. One's called Leadership and All That Jazz. But the first book is just amazing because it's from someone in our world of furniture, and how his heart was to give first, and then how it changed his employees, how they thought of them as family, and then how successful they became because of an atmosphere of safety and bringing out the best in everybody. So we'll share at the end of those, and you can write them down, and it's a great thing, an Audible read or an Audible. They're both, it's great books. So thank you again, Gary.
Thank you.
I owe you something.
So yes, you owe Gary a nice dinner, and the next time you see him. So, Julie, thank you so much for helping us put this thing together with Gary. Gary, so great to have you here with us and sharing your wisdom. This has been terrific. We are very grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. It was fun.